Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and The Fool.
Well, that's sort of recreation center background rumble of the speaker just sort of, hey, someone up back there? Alright, yeah, alright. You know, like Baldur's Gate's, like background noises? Yeah, like that, but...
I know what you mean about the pool. The sound carries really well in a swimming pool, and they're just that
you just sort of half hear conversations everywhere.
Yeah. It's actually kind of nice.
Kind of probably similar to why people put the news on low. Just to get that sort of... you feel like you've got company around. Mm-hmm. People do that nowadays with that. Podcasts. Streams, I guess.
Yeah, streams and podcasts. Yeah, just having a stream running in the background. Or
I think a stream probably more so just because it's more personal.
Yeah.
Because it's live. And you can interact if you wanted. Even if you never do, the thought of being able to interact is quite powerful, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, how's sound looking?
It's a little quiet, but we get louder as we go, so it's fine.
All right. Whew.
Where are you? Just a little warm.
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting. So, they installed those two new signs. Those two new signs on the highway, like you go past that hill. So you go over that hill. So in Port Creek, it's about -5. Then you go over that hill. As you're driving, it just gets colder and colder and colder and colder until it goes down 12 degrees colder.
It feels so warm.
It does, though.
Compared to -45 we had.
Yeah.
That was a bit colder.
Yeah. No, it feels ridiculously warm in Port Creek. It's 6 degrees. Well, -6. But wow. Still, -6 is just insane.
Springtime already.
Yeah.
So, you do that research you wanted to do?
Nope.
You remember what it was?
Nope.
It was something to do with...
Oh, yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. No, I didn't. I did find an interesting statistic, though, which is, well, for one thing, we need more twin studies.
Well, they're very useful.
They're very useful. They're hard to do, though, aren't they? Because...
Yeah, well, there's a lot of ethical considerations, and then there's the fact that identical twins aren't the most common thing either.
Yeah, well, it's identical twins that are put up for adoption, isn't it, basically?
Not necessarily. If you can find some divergent in their life, like if it was lifestyle behaviors as an adult and they don't live in the same house anymore and they're doing different things.
So the interesting statistics is among identical twins, 20% of them, like this is insane amount comparatively, so 20% identical twins, one of the twins will identify as trans. Now, in normal populations that aren't identical twins, it's from the estimate is 0.8 to 0.4% of people identify as trans.
This is a bit weird, but you know who went over the philosophy of this? Schlock Mercenary.
Really?
You've read Schlock Mercenary, right? Like that little blob that it's like Star Trek, basically. The man, the head scientist of the humans, accidentally clones himself like 10 billion times.
Oh yeah, right.
And then they become the biggest demographic for everything. Yeah. So their favorite TV show is now the most watched TV show. Their favorite game is the most played game. Their favorite book is the most bought book. And they begin to grow sick of the fact that everyone is just like them. They want differentiation. Mm-hmm. And so some alien develops a technology that allows you to change into a random form. Yeah. With like I don't know, I think it might change your interests as well, I don't remember. Yeah. Or there might have just been a psychological aspect of the changing form. Mm-hmm. But they go into this machine to differentiate, and then it turns out that it didn't solve their problems, basically, and they were, the alien was just taking advantage of the situation, basically. And then they learned to just accept, like, hey, I am who I am, this is... It's funny, because the reason why he split into I think it was 10 million copies, is to save his life, because he was about to get killed, so he jumped through a portal to escape. Yeah. And the portal went to 10 million locations simultaneously. Yeah. Because it went to every teleportation gate in the universe. And, so I wouldn't be surprised if...
While I was talking about the twin studies, though, is in twin studies, identical twins that are separated, they are like the rest of the normal demographic. And same with... is it just the twins that aren't identical? Yeah. They are also the normal demographic. It's just identical twins.
That are raised together.
Yeah, that's 20%, which is a huge leap from any other group.
Yeah, and so in line with the schlock mercenary thing. I wouldn't be surprised about that because I think a lot of identical twins, they base their identity on being the same.
Yeah. Well, there's a music pair in the UK which their name, they actually go under one name. It's their two names combined. That's how they perform.
But I imagine a lot of them are desperate for some differentiation.
Yeah.
Because I think a problem as well is, well, I mean, look, we're not twins. We're 4 years apart.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of different stuff in life. Like I did a bunch of experiential programs that you didn't. We lived different places in the world. We've
traveled different places.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's actually less now. But I do remember in the past a lot where I would... Well, Battle Brothers, I think, is the latest one I can think of.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, this game looks like the crazy... this is going to be the greatest game ever. And you have played that game so much more than me.
Yeah, well, it's the same with Dead Cells, I think, as well.
Yeah, Dead Cells was a game that I was like, this is... whew. And then, reversely, Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Like, you were the one that really wanted Breath of the Wild. You were following it for years. I had never heard of it.
Yeah.
And then I just saw you playing, and I was like, meh. And then I was like... And then, I can't remember what it was, but you were... I think you maybe went to school and left your Switch here or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, can I just try one of your Switch games? You know, so I played a bit of Celeste, and I was like, oh, this is all right. Yeah. And then I was like, I'll try Breath of the Wild. And from the first 10 minutes, this is the greatest game that has ever gamed.
Yeah.
And it just got better from there. And
well, another thing recently, I mean, you got this to play with me to a certain point, or multiplayer, but my friends got into Project Zomboid because Project Zomboid is having a pretty big boom and they're doing some nice updates for it. And so I started playing with my friends again, and so I got back into Project Zomboid.
But what happened with Battle Brothers was I was kind of like, hey, that was my thing.
Yeah.
That was what I was... And it used to happen when we were younger a lot when I would play Age of Wonders, and then you would be playing, I don't know, Ocarina of Time or something. I'd be like, oh, I'm going to play Age of Wonders. And then you're like, I want to play Age of Wonders. Fine, I'll play Skyrim. I want to play Skyrim. Fine, I'll play... And I was the only one that had a computer for a long time, too. And so I lost a couple save files that way. Good man.
Yeah. I think that's a truism across all older siblings, that they will lose save files to younger siblings.
Well, I don't think I was harsh enough. I should have just been like, yeah, you don't have a laptop. I didn't have a laptop when I was
No, but I mean, if they share a console, if there's a home computer, save files will be lost.
Well, I don't think it's just older siblings necessarily. Like, well, I don't know how to say this, but your last story save file's gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't really care. I never could get very far in that game. It's incredibly difficult.
I'm basically at the exact same point you stopped, so in theory you could, which is where
Sorry, the game's not incredibly difficult. I didn't care enough to get good enough to keep playing it.
Well, the tiger fight was, like, the game was kind of interesting and strategic, and then the tiger fight is weirdly almost impossible. Like, it's just so... And it's not like, look, the fight just before the tiger is much harder than the rest of the fights. But it's interesting because you have to do a lot of strategy and tactics, and you have to...
Yeah, I got stuck at the fight before the tiger, I think.
You have to protect your teammates.
Yeah.
But then the tiger is just a hit point sponge, and it's a game about tactics. So it's kind of, how do you tactically hit something over and over again? So
in Battle Brothers Legend mod, I've come to a realization that I kind of hate the legendary monsters. One of the ideas of Legends mod is it makes it so the upper ceiling for your Battle Brothers is greater, and you can have more high fantasy. Basically adds high fantasy to the game. However, you can play with the Legends without having like the wizards and the paladins and whatnot, and you can have like a few special brothers. But they take the normal monsters, like a direwolf, and they add the winter wolf or the white wolf as a variant, and they take the Weirderschneck, which is the giant spider, and they add the redback Weirderschneck, which is a super poisonous one. And they take the skin ghouls and they take the ghouls and they add the skin ghouls, which are more dangerous variants. So they have a bunch of different dangerous variants. However, the only variant unit that I like is the redback. And why I like it is because the redback spawns with normal spiders, and the redback is a lot stronger than them, but it's not insanely strong. Now, the skin ghouls are the Nazkira on steroids, and they are not fun to play against, because I was thinking about what's the fundamental thing about fighting the ghouls, right? And they're overwhelming horde. You have to carefully kill them so they don't eat their own dead and get bigger. Their morale is terrible, So if you smash into them with a heavy fist, they will break and scatter, and their health is quite low except when they get big. But even then, the big ones can be handled and carefully managed. Now, the skin ghouls is, even the little ones are insanely tough. They do not break unless you've, absolutely defeated them. The giant ones are almost... So there's a feature that stops brothers from getting swallowed.
Mm-hmm.
You need that feature to fight the giant ones. And it's just completely changes their design, makes it an incredibly dangerous and terrifying fight, and it goes away from their design. Those are the second most tolerable, because then there's the winter wolves, which they basically give immunity to everything, give them an insane amount of armor, give them far too many buffs. You know the overwhelm ability? So whenever you get attacked, you lose 10 attack and stats. So they gave those to the white wolves, and they can attack 5 times. They are not slowed by snow, so they can travel across snow. They do not get exhausted. And so I figured the only way to beat these things is to give every single one of my battle brothers spears, lower the spears, and fight them. And they jump into the spears so many times and take basically no damage that they break the spears, and my battle brothers can fight them. And so I end up installing the cheat mod into the game, so in case I ever encounter the winter wolves, I can give one of my battle brothers 900 action points, so he can kill all of them. And so I did this, and I had to actually reload the save, because his sword broke before he could kill them. And his sword is a 2-handed sword on full durability, and they're just so dumb. And then the same thing happened, so they give upgrades Lindworm, which is the still worm. And it's like, only one of them should ever spawn in a fight. Because Lindworms, you can have about 5 Lindworms, and that's a really tough fight. You can beat 5 Lindworms. One Stillworm can kill a whole veteran party. And they spawn in groups of 3. And it's just... And they just go against the core designs. Like, a lot of the times, why do they have immunity to stun? Why do they have immunity to knockback? Why are they giving them? I feel like the design's and I'll give them this cool thing, and I'll give them this OP thing, I'll give them this OP thing, and oh boy, it's just going to kill the party.
Yeah, there's...
Unless you have the adventuring party, which is OP against everything else in the game, and it's not fun to play the adventuring party.
Design is important.
Yeah.
A lot of developers aren't very good at it, and they...
Well, I think the Battle Brothers team is actually very good, but the Legends team, I think, is lacking. Like, their bear was so dumb when it first came out. They nerfed it a bunch, but it's just...
So, a way to add difficulty often is just more hit points.
Yeah.
Which is not very interesting.
No.
And that's what Breath of the Wild did for its hard mode.
Yeah.
Now, the saving grace for Breath of the Wild, which almost was a good idea, but they didn't quite do it, is much stronger weapons drop.
Yeah.
So what that means is the fighting is about the same difficulty for you to kill them in enough hits. Yeah. But if you have a bad weapon, you're gonna have a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
And the enemies kill you a lot faster.
Yeah.
So it just makes it you have to be a bit more careful about dodging, and you have to be more prepared for each combat. But what they should have done, really, is just keep the health the same, double the damage of all the enemies, and potentially even double the player's damage to make it more tense and dangerous, rather than make it boring. And preparation is very fun, but with Breath of the Wild especially, against enemies that are... blue and above, or black and above, really.
Yeah.
There's weapons that just don't work because they will break before the enemy takes any significant amount of damage. And that would even be fine, except they added regeneration. So you will actually go through your entire inventory before an enemy takes any damage.
So, one of the things in Battle Brothers is, unless you are fighting humans, basically every other combat in the game, you have to switch your gear, you have to get different things ready for the fight. That's one of the huge things the monsters add. If you're fighting a Lindworm, nets and heavy weapons are very good. So you can either have a Battle Brother team which has a spread of weapons, or you can go, okay, we're fighting this thing, everyone switch out your weapons to the axes. And then you're like, okay, here's a group of bandits, we're all going to switch to the spears to repel them. Here's a group of wolves, we're going to have our archers basically keep them at a distance. And so that's sort of the idea with the Legends. However, when you do the strategy that should work, it doesn't, just because of how absurd they are. And I've fought the Kraken in Battle Brothers, and I had an incredibly overpowered team, and I lost to the Kraken. The team I have now is stronger than the team that fought the Kraken, and they can't take on 4 white wolves. The Kraken is meant to be a fight in Battle Brothers. It's a base game monster, It's meant to be a fight in the game that's basically a toss of the dice. You're probably going to lose if you ever try to kill the Kraken. And then if you add anything to the game that's stronger than the Kraken, it actually breaks it.
It's one thing to be able to mod a game, and another thing to be able to design it. Mm-hmm. I noticed that with the Heroes of Might and Magic 3 third upgrade mod. The models are very nice looking.
Yeah.
And the creatures, some of them are quite cool, but they tend, except for the humans, for some reason the humans are actually well done, but they tend to just give them more speed, attack, and damage.
Yeah.
And the speed is especially egregious because it completely destroys the differentiation of the game. If your Super Mega Hydra, I don't know what they call them after Chaos Hydra, is faster than your opponent's Firebird, suddenly all the tier 8 creatures just feel the same because they can all go across the map in a single turn. They all get to go first. They all do a massive amount of damage. And sure, they have different special abilities, but there's a difference between
balancing them and making them all the same.
I guess there's that, but there's also between interesting and overwhelming, maybe.
Yeah, well, so your wrong kind of balance mod. You modified dragons, and then you tried to make everything else in the game balance them, or something?
I modified the Reaper.
Yeah, Reaper. But what you did, which I actually think is basically, if you're trying to make something like that, is you said, okay, what is this thing's core aspect?
And I exaggerated it.
Yeah, how do I exaggerate it? So the dragons, I mean, they're good at everything, so you just made dragons nightmares.
So in Dark Souls, they do this quite well, where you can kill most creatures in the game in about 4 hits.
Yeah.
Even some of the bosses. Maybe all the bosses, I don't know. But I was able to kill one of the bosses in 4 hits.
Yeah.
And you also take about 4 hits.
Yeah.
And these bosses, if you play normally, probably, I don't know how, like, they probably take 20, 30 hits. But I found a way to kill one of them in 4 hits. And, like, it's built into the game. But they don't tell you how to do it. You just have to kind of put together the pieces in your head. And so it's very much a rock, paper, scissors system.
Yeah.
Where it's interesting because it's about planning and thinking and overcoming rather than doing the same action over and over again. Once you figure out the action you need to do to succeed, you should be able to move on. And so I think actually books maybe have this issue too slightly, where so Lord of the Rings is an example of doing this right, where Sauron is unbeatable or nearly unbeatable.
Yeah. Like
Galadriel with the One Ring could probably beat him, or Gandalf, or
any of the powers could beat him with the One Ring. But...
So there is a way to beat him, but they state over and over again that it's not desirable.
Yeah.
Like even Denethor probably could do it. But
Boromir wanted to bring the ring back to his father. I mean, that was his initial idea. He would have claimed it for himself, but he wanted to bring it to Denethor.
But it doesn't... Denethor thinks he could do it. It doesn't mean he could. But Denethor is one of the more powerful characters in the series. Like Aragorn could, and I think Denethor is probably on the level of Aragorn.
Yeah.
But a lot of books and media in general, movies, cartoons, that sort of thing, the way to defeat something is not to go around, it's to have a second wind. It's to keep fighting, and then they stand up and they keep going. And that's essentially the book equivalent of a bunch of hit points.
Yeah, well, you described every single Dresden File and every single shonen.
Yeah, so Battlegrounds, especially in Dresden Files, is Harry has no energy and then he keeps going about 5 times. And the thing he's fighting about... Okay, well, if you've read Peace Talks, it's not a spoiler, but Battlegrounds is... The entire book's a fight, basically.
Yeah.
The thing he's fighting that entire time keeps getting absolutely crushed with another ally appearing out of nowhere and winning.
Yeah.
And then they just shrug them off and they keep going.
Yeah.
Actually, Endgame, very similar, where they just keep getting more and more allies to fight Thanos, and they just grind him down and they eventually win. But he... There was no cleverness, no... Like, in Infinity War, they come up with 3 to 5
strategy after strategy after strategy,
and they almost work each time.
Each one could have worked in a different way, and Thanos overcomes them.
And the closest one they have to straight up fight is when Thor attacks Thanos.
Yeah,
and Thor wins. it wasn't a hard fight. Like, Thor wins in the first second. It's just Thanos was ready for him, so he was able to complete his plan even though Thanos lost the fight.
Yeah.
So it was so it's not that Thanos is unbeatable. Like, they show him beat Hulk and Thor at the start, but once Thor gets the weapon he needs, then he has Thanos' weakness, as it were, and because Thor lost Mjolnir, so he's way powered down.
Mm-hmm.
And
which it goes against the idea of Ragnarok, which is you are the power, you don't need Mjolnir.
Well, I guess. Huh? How did he got it back somehow? How did that?
Time travel.
Okay, but wait, so he has to put the hammer back, though, right?
Yeah, eventually, but time travel gives you whenever you want to put it back.
Right, as long as he remembers to do it.
Yeah.
And then, like, he wakes up one day and grabs his hammer, and he's like, "Why does this have like 20 dents in it? I don't remember, and why is it 50 years older than I remember?" And then it smashes against his sister, and he's like, "Well, yeah, it was wearing out super fast. I'm not surprised."
Oh man, it just even Ragnarok has that sort of flaw of you are powerful without the hammer, and then he actually still can't beat her.
But, well, he does beat her with his power in the end. Like, he uses his lightning. And
well, no, she still survives that. He just holds her off so they can retreat.
Oh, right.
Then the fire giant kills her.
Right. They get the
Ender of...
whatever he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's... I think that's probably what makes things feel earned or not.
Yeah.
Like, we used to have this discussion about... character powers of, like, what's the most powerful character who earned it, because it's very easy to make up a fictional character that is more powerful than everyone else, like Majin Buu or the Dr. Manhattan. But even they feel like they've got a bit of earning it, because you see Majin Buu lose and you see Dr. Manhattan's struggle with infinite power.
That's the same with One Punch Man. He's bored. He wants...
Well, Dr. Manhattan, it's more a matter of, if I can have anything, then there's nothing I want.
He has his own thing, because he's all-powerful, whereas One Punch Man, just the thing he wanted was to be a superhero, and he wanted to have fights and be a superhero fighting villains, and it turns out he can win any fight.
Yeah, and I think that's a terrible plot idea, because... why did he want to be a superhero if not to save... Like, he obviously doesn't care about saving people.
Well, he does care about saving people.
No, he doesn't, because if he's bored, like, if you have the power to save everyone easily, you should be happy.
Maybe.
And then you can get on with your life once you've saved everyone. And also, like, from the 2 or 3 episodes I've seen where he, like, kills probably 10,000 to 50,000 people with fighting that giant, like, you would think that the challenge in his life could come from saving the most people while fighting these giant creatures. Like, punch it up into the atmosphere. And, like, Superman does this kind of thing all the time.
The cities are very good at getting evacuated, actually. No one's ever hurt. They evacuate all the people really fast. That's actually a thing in the comics.
Yeah, that's where it doesn't feel earned. Yeah. Like, you have an interesting option you can go for, and you decide to just write it out.
Yeah.
Whereas Superman... not all the writers manage this, but a lot of writers, Superman's struggle isn't winning the fight; it's winning it without destroying the planet, and or it's about, okay, I have a life. It's not my responsibility to look after the planet. I feel responsible. What do I do about that? Because if I have the power to save everyone, does that mean I have the responsibility to save everyone?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what Spider-Man is about too. But in Spider-Man's case, he has limitations, so he can take breaks in a way because he knows that it's impossible for him to save everyone.
Yeah.
Even though he does try, and I think that's probably what Gwen Stacy's death was about, was to show you can't save everyone, even if you want to. But with Superman, he kind of can save everyone.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a matter of, well, Superman has a right to a life as well.
Yeah.
We're not in some horrible utilitarian society where he has to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and so we have to take a person and destroy them in order for everyone else to live. I mean, maybe that is the only way society can function, but that is something you can explore with Superman.
Yeah.
Maybe you do need the sacrifice who is the greatest hero to completely destroy themselves. And I think that's what a lot of rulers throughout history have thought of their people. Like, I will, like, especially well, a recent example is the CIA in the United States, where they did a lot of testing on American citizens.
Yeah.
Torture, LSD, like the MK Ultra was one. But I learned about recently something called Operation Sea Spray, where they put a ship out in the harbor of San Francisco, and they bombarded San Francisco with a bacteria cloud, basically, that infected all 800,000 people in the city. And it was a bacteria they thought was harmless. 10 people ended up getting very sick, and one person ended up dying out of 800,000. So it was fairly harmless, but they did it to their own people.
Yeah.
And they did it because they wanted to see how effective a bioweapon attack would be on San Francisco. So they could potentially say, is this a problem we need to look for solutions for? And probably the unspoken part of, how can we use this against Russia and China? Of course.
How effective are nuclear weapons? We shall drop one.
So they did that. They dropped a bunch of...
Well, didn't they make test towns?
They dropped a bunch of radioactive dust over one of the states and wanted to see how far it would spread. And they think that gave like 1,000 people cancer or something. So they've done... That was the military thing. The military was also the Operation Sea Spray. MK Ultra was CIA. So what they're doing is they're saying, we are treating you as a sacrifice that we're willing to make for the good of the country. And it could be.
We are willing to sacrifice you for the good of the country.
From our lofty viewpoint of being protected by these people, we can look at them and say, hey, how dare you? How dare you go against human morals and virtues and whatnot? But it could be that without them being there, we would be conquered by someone else who would be worse, or where we wouldn't be there at all. So there is a... Now, of course, the ideal would be you get all 800,000 people of San Francisco to volunteer for the military says, we're going to do this to San Francisco. You have 2 weeks to leave. We're doing this test. It's a harmless bacteria, but we need to know for the safety. If you see that is the virtuous compromise, I think. Not to say that the middle ground is always the correct thing. Yeah. But you aren't. If you can't win with principles, you can't win at all.
One of the top negotiators in the world and diplomats and like suicide, he does all those things. So convince people not commit suicide, all that. He hates middle grounds because he says both people lose. Because in human psyche, you think about the loss more than the win, and middle ground usually there's a win and a loss.
Right. So the two countries or whatever might just become more angry at each other.
Yeah. So you have to make it basically pure wins. So if you can't if the win. He'd rather take two small things over, here's two big wins, but there's also a few losses in it. It's like, no, don't do that, because those few losses are what people care about.
I wonder if what would be better, a massive win on one side versus a loss on the other, or like the two small losses, because then you have one group that's happy, and then next time around, the other group can get massively happy, and then both of them are like, oh, well, we did get that one up on them that one time, so we can't complain too much if they get the one up on us this time. That actually kind of leads into... You were saying you didn't like Winston Churchill's quote on democracy of democracy is a terrible form of government, but it's the best we have.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
So I was thinking about it, and I think he's right, and here's why, and I think it might assuage your concerns.
Well, just because I dislike it doesn't mean I don't think it's right or wrong.
But your complaint with it was that it prevented the idea of progressivism, of being able to move to a future where we have something better than democracy, because it's a sort of giving up statement almost.
Yeah, no, it does feel a bit like that.
Because it's not this; it's the best one we have for now. It's just this is the best one we have.
Yeah.
So, I think the best form of government, in terms of governance, is probably fascism, because then you have everyone working to serve the government, all for the government, all by the people. All money, all workforce is dedicated towards the government. You have a very strong government, very strong society. Yeah. With democracy, your government is slow and ineffectual and doesn't change very often, doesn't do much. It's rife with corruption. It's massively corrupt system. Probably the most corrupt. Maybe communism's more corrupt, but democracy is massively corrupt. For the most part. Singapore has the lowest corruption on earth for some reason, but they're not exactly democratic. It's kind of weird. But there is room for a lot of corruption in democracy. No one's happy. You never get the person in you want. The people you do want, you don't really want. You vote for the representatives that don't actually represent you. But the government doesn't actually have it doesn't really do anything other than kind of keep everything sort of going in a hodgepodge way. And what matters is not the political system, but how you live your lives.
Yeah.
And so a democracy is best for the people. It's for the people. Demos, right?
Yeah.
Human. So a democracy, ruled by the people, I think you can look at it as a system whereby the people get to live their lives for themselves. Whereas in a system like I don't know if you've ever listened to Mussolini's quotes on fascism.
No.
It sounds incredibly boring. He says, like, everything you do from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep should be for the benefit of the government. You should go to the job you're assigned to. You should work there. You should, and it sounds like a endless dull boarding school or something. Like, it sounds so boring. There's no, like, even if you were in, like, a feudal society or peasants, right?
Yeah.
A medieval feudal society, I should say, because I guess you could have a modern feudal system. But you can only farm. All you do is farm. And you don't have room for self-expression, similar to fascism. Because your job has been assigned to you, essentially.
Yeah.
For one thing, it's assigned to you out of because you need it. It's essential. So you can't really deny that, whereas the government is forcing you to do something, which feels worse. Like, you might be annoyed that you have to drink water every day.
Yeah.
But it's whatever, I'll do it. Compared to someone making you do laps every day. You're like, well, if you didn't exist, I wouldn't have to do this, you jerk. So I think a necessity is a lot more acceptable than a top-down enforcement. And secondly, even a feudal farmer that all they do is farm and they can't choose their own career, they have the winter to, make up stories, see their friends.
There's a huge... I mean, you're going by a very simple view of the feudal system because it's a lot more nuanced than that, even.
In terms of...
what they could do and how it worked and being a farmer.
Right, so how many choices you had, how much...
Yeah. There's this very weird thing, actually, that started... the end of the feudal system was because of freemen. And so there was towns that literally would say, come to our town and become a freeman. And they would help feudal peasants hide out in the town until enough time passed for them to become a freeman. And that's one thing. Also, you could earn extra money and you could buy yourself a freeman. But there's cases of people being freemen who then became feudal because it's better. And
so fascist ants.
Like, you had a huge amount of choice, actually. I mean, some people had less choice than other, but even then, the feudal system is very nuanced and kind of weird.
So, like, ants are fascist.
Yeah.
Bees are fascist. They do everything for their queen, which in this case is their government, their ruler.
Huh, that's actually interesting. As beach bees are democratic. If their queen pisses them off, they will murder her.
Well, that doesn't mean it's democratic. Because if your fascist government isn't building towards the ideal you believe in, you could overthrow them for a different fascist leader.
Yeah, well, they'll murder the queen if she annoys them, and then they will form into very small groups and go off and find different places to live.
The idea of fascism is to transcend mortality by a dedication to the government.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as... Well, communism is fascism as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's a fascist system. Now, I'm probably wrong there to a degree. I'm sure there's economic differences. But in terms of... Like, they're both authoritarian.
Yeah.
But they are also both... Like, under fascism, the government does own all the businesses as well. So it is... it's fairly socialist. Like, not as socialist as communism, necessarily. But they're kind of... They are both the government controls everything type systems. Under fascism, the government might say, all right, we need merchants, you're the merchants, we need this, you're that. Whereas under communism, they say...
You farm potato.
You give me everything and then I will dole it out.
Yeah.
Whereas the fascists will say, these are all state-controlled.
Yeah.
So China, actually, kind of is kind of a fascist-y.
Yeah, so the one for small government is basically people saying... We don't like the amount of overreach that government has. We just want to live our life, so even more towards democracy. I want small government. Like,
yeah, I don't. I think you can have. You Yeah. Yeah, I don't... It's kind of... I don't think any labels are perfect because...
Decentralized small government, where that's the thing I hear.
Well, I'm just trying to think of, like... in theory, you could have a democracy that was... like communism can be democratic. And fascism... I wonder if fascism can be democratic. Probably not, because it's not about the people, it's about the government.
Yeah.
It's kind of an opposing viewpoint. So the people... But then with fascism, you think you'd have to assume there is a ideal government you are working towards, which is kind of...
the government that's in charge. That's
but someone's at the helm at some point.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of falls apart, because at that point, it's not about the government, it's about who's in charge. Unless we already... Is there like a platonic government out there that we can aim towards? That maybe there is. Maybe like I haven't learned much about fascism really, but so I think that's what you. Anyways, with your idea of democracy, yeah. I think you could potentially look at democracy as a system whereby you are allowed to be you.
Yeah.
You can do you within the system rather than serving the government, and so the governmental system of democracy is very weak. Unstable, terrible, slow, ineffectual, annoying. But the government isn't your life. It doesn't consume you. Whereas that's the biggest thing about fascism is it consumes your life because you are part of the government in fascism.
Yes.
So it's very boring. And to clarify, the Nazis weren't fascist. They were Nazis.
Yes.
The Nazis were something else. They were not they were Nazis. That it was unique to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's a more occult system.
Yeah. Was Mussolini more fascist?
Mussolini was straight up fascist. Yeah. Like he basically invented fascism. Like it's based on pragmatism, but his country I think was the first one that really successfully implemented it.
Yeah.
And that I know of. There was some people before. I don't know if Spain did it first or something, but I don't think so. But the Italians were fascist, and I think people, like with pragmatism and fascism at the start, I don't think people necessarily
realize what they're getting into, or
well, no, I think they did, but because it's not bad in of itself, right? Like there's nothing wrong with wanting to live in a place where all you do is work towards the goal of making the government as good as possible, as great as possible, to become some. So it's like, I think with the death of God, fascism was a nice alternative because you couldn't...
The government became God?
Yeah, you couldn't work towards a common... you couldn't work towards serving God, so instead you chose to serve the government because you want your life to mean something and to have something that carries on beyond you. And... so you need an institution in order to funnel that for the most part, unless you're, I don't know, like a ruler, and then maybe you can have your legacy as a ruler, like Alexander the Great or something.
Yeah.
But it's quite hard for the average person to, I don't know what you'd call it, integrate with the universe. Oh, that actually reminds me. I had this thought where people feel incomplete because of the death of God. There's why are we doing anything? Why are we here? What's this? What's like? There is no infinite sandwich to move towards.
Yes.
So you feel incomplete. You're no matter how much you have, no matter how much you take, it's always hollow.
Yeah. And
so I'll just read it as I wrote it, I guess. Upon realizing this, we realize we cannot become complete without knowing everything.
Yeah.
Because we have this hole, and so the more we can put in the hole, the more we know. But so I guess actually, we're not just incomplete because of lack of God. We are literally incomplete.
Yeah.
A human being is not everything. Therefore, we're incomplete. The completion of everything is the entire universe.
Yeah.
So we are incomplete, and to become complete, we have to know everything. And of course, that's impossible to know everything.
Yeah.
So then you get a secondary goal, which is integration. So you want to be perfect, you want to be complete. And you realize quite quickly you cannot be complete because there's always something out of your grasp. You cannot become the universe.
Yeah.
So the only way to become the universe is to integrate with the universe. So how do you do this? Well, for a long time, the wise, we'll call them, sure, if you want to be rhetorical, I guess, but people chose God. They chose the universe. I will, if I integrate with God, if I integrate with the universe, if I'm one with the universe, one with God, then I will be complete in a sense that I am a cell that makes up the body of everything.
Yeah. And
so if I am in my place and doing my thing, then I am complete. And actually, it's interesting. So all cells are born knowing what they want to do, and there's millions of them, and they all have a unique task that they're best suited for.
Yeah.
And so they should do their task, and then everything works. And when a cell does a job that isn't it, it's called cancer.
Yeah. And so, you just happen to be a cell that was made to be in the rectum. That's just what I thought. Each one has a purpose, and you're on the butt.
Well, I think you could look at it as it knows its purpose, and when you know you don't. There's a lot to be said for integrating with yourself, which is part of integrating with the universe, rather than thinking yourself a slave to the material world, or I'm a slave to your body. Sitch and Adam recently were talking about that. I don't know if you've seen them, but they were talking to
I've heard of them.
They were talking to Sargon about this, where Sitch was saying, well, what, do you want to be a slave to your body? And Sargon said, we live in our body and we are part of it, so we're one and the same. Like you have to integrate with them. And he said, well, yeah, but your emotions, like happiness, it's just a chemical thing. And Sargon said, well, light is just photons moving through the air, and sound is just waves of energy. And yet a movie is still a beautiful thing. Like you cannot deny your humanness, so you should embrace it. If you deny your humanness, what do you gain? You don't gain anything by denying it.
Yeah. And
you gain everything by embracing it. Like you were born as a thing, and if you don't accept that thing, then you have nothing. Again, you've rejected God, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think that is where rationalism fails. And I think that's what Sargon calls scientism, where people have become so dedicated with, well, what makes up everything, we have to worship the science and what.
Yeah.
But science doesn't actually tell you what you should do. It tells you how things work, but it doesn't tell you what to do about that. But then scientists are the ones that are now dictating policy to a degree, is his argument.
Well, there's the term, I was just listening to this today, which people say the sciences.
And the science doesn't say anything.
Well, the guy said, next time someone tells you the science says, or like you hear that, he said, I'm going to reject that statement, because science is just a collection of information and facts. It doesn't tell you anything. It's the information you have to then make decisions from.
Yeah, something like, okay, every time you eat a bowl of cornflakes, 10 million people die. That's what the science says, right? That doesn't tell you what you should do at all. It's up to you to decide if you want to eat cornflakes or not.
Yeah.
And that is a moral choice. There is no scientific choice in there whatsoever. A scientist cannot, or science itself cannot say do or do not eat cornflakes, because there is no right or wrong. There is no judgment there. Mm-hmm. It's just, this is what happens. A equals B. That's what happens. But there is nothing to listen to. If you say, well, clearly you shouldn't eat cornflakes because it kills a million people, that is a moral judgment, and that is not something you get from a scientist.
No.
Now, obviously, scientists are humans, so they are moral beings. But in their role as a scientist, there's no... You do not... Look, you want the scientist to be the one figuring out what the effects of eating a bowl of cornflakes is.
Yeah.
But it's quite rare that someone's an expert in two fields, right?
Yes.
So you go to the scientist for the what happens. But then what do? You should go to the politician or the guru or the sage. You want to go to the person who deals in morals or deals in politics. Like, what is the policy here? What is the... Now, obviously, a lot of politicians are incompetent. A lot of gurus are scammers. But a lot of scientists are frauds, too. So you're already... But there's a lot of good people out there, too. And even a lot of the cheaters and scammers, they're trying their best to a degree. It's just they want to do a little extra on the side. Or they're influenced by some other aspect in their life.
Yeah.
So the science doesn't tell you anything.
No.
And even then, even if... No, science doesn't tell you anything. But even the interpretation of science, or even the scientific results themselves, are always in question under the system of science, because that's what science is about, is constant skepticism. So I'll actually get into skepticism in a moment. I'll just finish up the integration thought. But so the wise chose God, chose the universe to integrate. But modernists were lost. They killed God.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I need to integrate with something because I want to be complete. I want to.
Yeah.
So they chose society. To disobey the dictates of society, even if it's wrong, is disintegration. Because so you have chosen to become part of this whole, and to break away from that whole, you are ripping yourself out of the universe. You are becoming incomplete. You are becoming imperfect. So if perfection is good, then imperfection is evil. Right? So you are so to go against society is to get destroyed. So in some, I wrote this very late at night. Okay, so
yeah, it's so I actually have categorization. I wrote something about this. I didn't complete the script, but basically, you are a genius when you are tired, so long as you are tired in that moment. And the whole idea is...
Because you can't find the flaws in the...
Yeah, the whole idea is, like, you're up late at night, and you, like, write the brilliant script, or you figure out some problem, like, I'm a genius!
Yeah.
And then the next morning, you're like, what?
I think there's two parts to that. There's a moment of clarity in which your understanding is heightened beyond what it normally is at.
Yeah.
But I think there's also... your ability to self-criticize is lowered, so you're less able to actually find flaws in your idea. So my summary is to not be one with society, to not get vaccinated, for instance, is to blaspheme against God.
Yeah.
And where that comes into the idea of scientism and blind following of ideas. And also Sargon's argument against scientism, against people just, the science says this, the science says that. It's interesting Sargon, of all people, makes that argument because he dismisses Plato. But Plato is the one that says we need to point towards a goal and go towards. Now, Sargon would say that the pursuit of that imaginary goal, like communism, will allow you to cause any amount of evil on the path to get there because which maybe I haven't read enough of Plato to know about that, but I think saying that there is a perfect form, like there is an object morality, object morality out there, because that's what Sargon is saying by saying that there is something worth living for rather than just listening to what the scientists say.
Yeah.
Because if there is a moral system that you should aim towards, then that means that there is a set of morality that is right. And so Sargon could be a postmodernist and say, well, I'm British, so I'm going to just say the British one is right. Which maybe that is his argument, in which case you could go against Plato. But if you say there is a right system, and I believe the British are closest to it, then you'd be a nationalist. But you would also, in his case, not I, but you would also be saying there is a Platonic system of there's Platonic virtues out there, a Platonic system of morality that you are aiming towards and moving towards. Now, if you just put the simplest little thing in there that one of these virtues of society is not to allow the ends to justify the means, that is one of the Platonic ideals, then you can no longer do the communist kill everyone in the way of perfection, because you'll never reach perfection if you kill people in the way of perfection, because that is part of all of perfection. You cannot actually achieve it. So the infinite sandwich, right, is perfection. But the actual perfection is the road to get there. Like the actual ultimate goal is the motion. So you are if you are on the path, you are already perfect. But you cannot. That doesn't mean you can stop, because then you're not perfect. You have to be in motion.
So the divergence of Buddhism, as it traveled farther east, something interesting happened to Buddhism. So Buddhism started in India, I believe, with the original Buddha.
Yeah.
And it was they also have the idea of reincarnations in India, and you reincarnate until you get to perfection. Mm-hmm. And you can actually go up and down in reincarnation. If you're bad this life, then you go lower down scale, and you go up and down. And you can move away from perfection.
It's very easy to do.
And not moving towards perfection is wrong in that ideal. So then the philosophy of Buddhism moved to China. And Chinese Buddhism is absolutely brutal. And it's basically, no matter what you do, you'll make a mistake. Because there is actually perfection. And it's achievable theoretically. It's like a theoretical...
Then about, like, I'm not expert by any means in Chinese Buddhism, but what I've seen from various glimpses of Chinese culture is they do seem to have a very large acceptance of the fact that humans are imperfect.
Yeah, no,
they sort of embrace that idea.
Yeah, so that's a huge part of the Chinese. So, basically, and this, even though they got rid of Buddhism from China to an extent, they got rid of the religion that they had. Basically, in Chinese religion, and this affects the whole region sort of around it, is you're going to hell. Like, you are going to mess up, you're going to hell. However,
your son can ask for redemption.
You can be redeemed. Yeah. So they have the idea of redemption, but basically, so they sort of move away from the idea of if you're not moving towards heaven, then you're moving towards hell. It's you're going to hell, but you can be redeemed. And then when it moves across into Japan, they have Buddhism, however they have Zen Buddhism. And Japan actually doesn't really have Buddhism in the sense that any other of the Eastern countries had to extent. Tibet sort of started embracing Japan's. But theirs is you're flawed and you can move towards perfection. And that's basically moving towards being enlightenment, moving towards perfection, moving towards divinity is their whole idea. However, a principle that came from Yin Yang, I can't remember which original group that is. Is that Taoism? No.
Yeah.
Taoism. Yeah. So Taoism, Yin Yang.
Taoism, yeah.
And Japan really embracing that is if you are not moving towards good, it doesn't mean you're going towards evil. It just means you're not moving towards good. You choose to be evil, you choose to go towards good. Being evil badly doesn't mean you're good, sort of thing. Like, they're opposite. Not doing it is not the opposite.
Well, what I would say is if you're walking on the path, and you're, even if you're walking in the wrong direction, like you're accidentally walking down the infinite staircase, right? You are still on the staircase.
Yeah.
However, if you leave the staircase and you just stand still, then, well, you're not on the staircase. Mm-hmm. So, no, I'm not saying Japan agrees with this, but I think that all that matters is motion. As long as you are,
so Japanese philosophy, because it's very embracing of things, so someone could say, oh, if you're not moving on the staircase, then that is evil because you're not moving.
Right. Well, whereas, I think in Zen Buddhism that you can't make judgments. It's because it's very personal. Like it's the idea of Orpheus not looking back to save Eurydice. Yeah. They took that to the extreme of, we trust you so much to figure out life for yourself that we're not going to tell you anything.
Yes.
We're going to say the staircase exists.
Yes.
We're not going to tell you which direction to walk up it. We're not going to tell you where it is. We're just going to say, yeah, it's there. And that's how much they trust you.
Yeah.
And
well, it's a very big part of it is it is not evil to not do good. And that's, I think, a huge thing for a lot of people is if you're not doing good, then you're evil. Mm. Whereas in Japanese culture and in the philosophy of Zen Buddhism, if you're not doing good, it doesn't mean you're doing evil. It just means you're not doing good.
No, I think...
And even then, they another thing is they accept... I mean, the yin yang, there's the white dot and the black and the whatever. Like, you can have someone who says, you have to be healthy, and they smoke. It's like, what on earth, why are you smoking? And the person's like, well, I'm flawed, I still have a life.
So I'm going to disagree with you on the, if you're not doing good, you're doing evil. Because if you are not attempting to do good, then you are causing yourself untold suffering. In which case you are harming one person horribly and constantly, which is yourself. So I would call that evil. So I think like there's just different ways of saying the same thing, right? Yeah. So if you are not achieving good, that doesn't mean you are doing evil, right? So like you are doing things that don't end up being good. That doesn't mean you are doing evil. However, if you aren't trying to do something, I think that could be considered harmful. Now, that said, I think there's also and this is a part of Japanese as well. For most issues, if you ignore them, they will go away. It's kind of not what is taught, I don't think, in general, but it's very true. And there is a saying in Zen Buddhism, which is, if you have a problem, don't worry. Because if you can do something about it, you will do something about it. And then there's no need to worry.
It's dealt with.
if you can't do anything about it, then you don't need to do anything, and there's no need to worry.
Yeah.
So I think that, so I guess I agree with the Zen Buddhism.
Yeah.
But I think that if you are suffering, you might want to start looking around at the very least. So I think that, let's say starting in 2014, 2015 for myself.
Yeah.
If I hadn't taken the path I did, dropping out of school, I don't even know how to conceptualize it really, just like kind of shattering every view I had of the world in some ways.
Yeah.
To a degree. Not entirely, but I kind of fought against the life I'd built for myself in a way, or I had
conceptualized that you were going to live for the life.
Yeah, or I realized that if I wanted to stay true to my principles, then I couldn't stay on the path I was on because it didn't work. I couldn't have both.
Yeah.
And not just principles, like my brain was tearing apart, but it's kind of I'm not really sure what I did because it was very slow and long and still going on process. But I think that if I hadn't done that, if I had just sort of said, whatever, I'll just concede this ground rather than stand my ground in, because I'm not sure what I was fighting, what I am fighting for exactly, but there's to me a very obvious concession, and not like, I guess what I could say is, well, this is just, the school just sucks like this, the interactions with people are just boring, it's just, sometimes you just got to go do the horrible thing with the people because that's what your duty is.
Yeah.
So a sort of collectivist ideal almost. I think if I had stuck with that, so that was 2015, let's say, so for the last 7 years, I think as an aggregate, on average, if I had stuck with that, my life would have been, for those last 7 years, happier. I think I would have had a better paper education. I would have completed school. I think I would spend more time with friends. I think I would have a better relationship with my family.
Yeah.
Like with our dad and with our mom.
Yeah.
Especially our dad. And I think I would have probably done better with getting a career. Like, I think I would be not living here right now. I'd be off, like, with a career, working somewhere. I think I would have done better in relationships if I hadn't done what I did. Now, the next 10 years of my life, those last 7 years, I think I would have been happier, had a better career, better relationships, better romantic relationships. I think that would have all been, on average, better.
Yeah.
However, the up and down mundanity, the leveling of, no matter, it's kind of like if you, all you do is run around in your backyard for fun.
Yeah.
At some point, that backyard, it's going to feel awfully small. And you're going to, but if you decide, I'm going to, like, you hike and it hurts and you're weak and you're tired all the time because you're going on these mountain ranges and you're falling, you don't know how to hike, you don't know what shoes to wear, you're getting massive blisters.
Yeah.
It's much less fun. But I think in the end, the strength you gain and the knowledge and the whole world is open to you.
Yeah.
And so I think the next 10 years from now, or the next 7 years, let's say, if I hadn't done what I did, I think I would have at some point gotten a divorce, definitely, like guaranteed. I would have started to hate my friends, like the ones I'd kept, because I would have been like, I don't have any reason to, I don't have anything in common with you people. I don't have any reason to be with you people.
Yeah.
I was just there because it was convenient. And I think I would have a lot of bad days and not know why. Like, I would just be like, oh, today's one of these bad days. Like, it would be like 50-50.
Yeah.
And at my career, I'd be like, do I want to do this? I would be, I think I would go after, like, divorce after divorce type thing without understanding why. I would have cycles of friends without knowing why. I'd be like, how come this relationship didn't work? Why does everyone leave me, sort of thing? Like, I don't understand why. And I think they would have, and I think friends as well. They'd be like, why do friends keep leaving me? I don't get it. Like, what am I, like, and I don't think I'd be able to even see, like, what I was doing wrong. I'd just be kind of lost in this, like, every time I keep, like, reaching for, I'm, like, scrambling at sand and it just keeps falling away type thing.
Yeah.
And where that would lead eventually, I don't know.
It's hell.
Yeah, but that, like, I mean, like, in terms of real world interactions, like, that, like, suicide or, like, just making everyone around you miserable, like, there's not many options out of there. I think at some point, because I'm me and that happened to a small degree and I took a hard right turn, I think I would just, stop. I'd be like, okay, I need to change something. Like I would be like, okay, this isn't working. I don't know what's not working, but I'm just going to change everything at random and see if that fixes it. And if it does, then I'll see what. So I think at some point I would have to
fall into a cycle of going to meditation retreats.
No, I don't think so. Well, maybe, but I don't. I think that would have been where I'd be trapped before. Like
that's why I'm saying that's where you would be before.
Yeah, but I think like those. If you go to one, I think you probably learn a lot. If you go to a bunch, I think you're not listening to the instructor. Not necessarily, but I think you can become addicted to self-improvement because what that is the self-help and self-improvement is a way to avoid helping yourself and instead just feel superior about your knowledge gain.
So you can go to church.
Yeah.
And you can have your time at church. You can go to a confessional and you can confess your sins. If you're every single day going to the confessional and confessing your sins, that's kind of useless. However, if you go there for your sins and your problem, you confess them like maybe every once in a month or even less than that, but it's just, this is this. You keep going to church. Going to church can be a good thing. And so...
Well, it's a way to, a community thing as well. But I think if you're going to church for the purpose of, you're saying, the answer will come, and it doesn't come, then you're, maybe you need to talk to the priest and be like, hey, it's just not sinking in.
You could...
Like with the meditation retreat, you could be like, hey, so I'm like the master at self-help and everything, but I'm not happy. Like, what do I do? And then the meditation guy can be like, how about you try something else? Like, why don't you, instead of coming here next year, why don't you go skiing in the Alps? I don't know. Well, do something different.
So I think the confessional mixed up, but basically, you can go to church because you're trying to find an answer, or you can go to church because you go to church. And what I was saying is, a person can go to meditation retreats because they really like going to a meditation retreat. They find it.
So something interesting happened this morning where I
a good time.
I need to clean up this desk so that we could do the podcast. But there was a bunch of paper on it, and there was a towel folded up on it. And I was like, okay, do I clean up the towel first or do I clean up the paper first? What do I do? Which one do I do? And I was working out at the time, so I had time to think. So I was just like, paper first, towel first, paper first. And then I was like, so it's like, because I do this thing where I order my life. So it's like, okay, step 1 is exercise, and step 2 will be this, and step 3 will be this. And so I was like, okay, step 1, exercise. Step 2, paper or towel? Papers or towels? Papers or towels? And I was like, okay, step 2, clean the desk. And then suddenly my mind was free. It was weird. It was like, and then what happened, which is really interesting, it's like, well, the towel's on top of the paper, so I put away the towel first. Like, everything just falls into place. And so I think it's very similar to that Zen story of when you are when you're reading, only read. When you are drinking tea, only drink tea. If you're drinking tea and reading, only drink tea and read. I think that's very true. Like, you were talking about skipping through videos because you just wanted to get to the good part and then you just didn't like the entire video. I think it's very similar where if what you're doing is, I want to look at the highlights of the Jingle Jam, let's say. Then go right ahead. But if you're I want to watch the Jingle Jam, and then you're like, oh no, this is a chore. I have to like get through and I'll skip through it. You're not having fun. Similarly, I'm going to play Minecraft. Yeah, you play. Don't tab out and look at something. Just play Minecraft. Even when you get that urge, don't listen to it. Just keep playing Minecraft. But if you're like, I want to listen to Dan Carlin and play some Minecraft, then do that, and don't do something else. Do that. There was actually this video I saw where this guy was talking about tips for success. It's one of those like, I'm a big go-getter. You got to do this if you want to have success. You want to do this, but so I don't like that mindset typically. I think it comes hand in hand a lot with the people that go to those meditation retreats. You have to network. You have to do this, and they're experts in succeeding, but they're not. That's their only expertise. Like they know how to be an expert at something, but what they're an expert at is being an expert. So it's kind of.
Well, I mean, it's those dating experts. Where it's like, if you want to date like 50 different girls, no. I just want to date one, please.
But the one thing he said that I thought was really good, he said a few things, but the one thing he said that was really good was, if you want, so he was talking about the flow state. He said, this takes 15 minutes to get into. So you have to be doing a task for a minimum of 15 minutes if you want to enter flow. So if you are, let's say, working on your a book, let's say you're writing a book, and he says, if you're writing a book, and you realize, oh, my laundry is dirty, you have to leave that laundry. That you do not do your laundry. You keep writing. You're like, oh, it's time to make. No, you do not make supper. You keep writing. Like if you keep doing all the tasks that come to mind, you will not get anywhere, because you have to be in that flow state to achieve, and you will every 15 minutes you're breaking yourself out of that state.
Yeah.
Then you're not going to get anywhere. So basically what his lesson came down to was, if you're doing something, do it. Don't do that and then like, oh, I'm going to do this quickly and then I'll pop back, and then I'll do this and I'll pop back. Yeah. Like, chunk your stuff. It's kind of like with a computer with a fragmented hard drive. It runs a lot slower than one where all the files are stored in the same location on the hard drive. Because then it doesn't have to spin all the way around to get the next little bit. And so if you're going to... So what you should do then, with the writing example, is when you write, you write. And then once you're done writing, you... when you're doing the laundry, you do laundry. You don't say, oh, here's an idea. No, you do the laundry. You get that done. Yeah. You make...
And if you live your life in chaos, then live your life in chaos. And that's why you suck, because you're living your life in chaos.
Well, you need to live in order, I think.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying, is like doing all those things at once. Like, if you're going to do all those things at once, do all the things at once, and see how that works out, sucker.
Yeah.
But actually, if you are doing all those things at once, then do all of them.
But don't add anything to it.
Yeah.
And maybe even don't take away.
Yeah.
Like, just do all of them at once. Well, taking away is probably less dangerous than adding.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, so, with scientism, I came across this very interesting thing. This massive amount of dogmatism.
What is dogmatism?
Dogmatism is blind adherence to a set of rules.
Okay.
So in the Catholic Church, it's you can't do X, Y, Z, and it's why? Well, because you're Catholic.
Right.
It's the letter of the law rather than the spirit. It's even similar to the idea, as I said, where to disobey society is to break free. So you will do something that is wrong, and you know it's wrong, because even though it goes against what you personally believe, because someone else told you otherwise.
All right.
So it's kind of almost putting your faith in something else far beyond yourself.
So dogmatism allows for the Inquisition.
Probably by what you mean, but I actually have a bit of sympathy for the Inquisition to a degree, because the Christians were very tolerant of other faiths and heresies.
Yeah.
Until the Barbers or the
Berbers.
It wasn't it was like a religious organization. They started getting like uppity basically, and they murdered a papal legate who was visiting, because they just wanted to overthrow the Catholic Church. And so they just started murdering church officials. And so the church was like, okay, never again. We're gonna
a little bit of game theory.
It was more we tried to be tolerant, and people use that to murder our officials, because it's like if you're tolerant of communists and then they start taking over your society. It's like you just go McCarthy on them. You're like, no, we're not risking the destruction of the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Now I think, there was an incident, and then the Inquisition lasted for 300 years.
Yeah.
So it might have been an overreaction, but I do have a sympathy for the idea that they tried.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. They saw the results and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, so dogmatism could also be saying something like the Earth is only 6,000 years old, because that's what the Bible says, even though I don't think the Bible really says that. Like, you can kind of add up all the ages and you get about 6,000, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, we have fairly clear evidence that it's not 6,000 years old, so perhaps that is more of an allegory.
Yeah.
Or maybe the years in the Bible are a different length than the years here. Like maybe Noah, who lived to 300 or whatever it was, in today's units would have lived to something more like 200 million.
Yeah.
It's hard to take the Bible at face value. So either you have to think your interpretation of the Bible is wrong, or it's an allegory.
Yeah.
In which case your interpretation is also wrong. The one I like that I thought of is, what if time speeds up over time? So a year back then is like 10 million years now. But so there are...
Well, it kind of is, though. Like the advancement of technology and society and how things actually speed up.
But human lifespan... Well, life in general is quite small compared to the universe.
Yeah.
So you could say a day is the first billion years, and the second day is the next billion. So you could do, like, you could say the first year of the universe was the Big Bang. The second year was the formation of the planets. The third year was the cooling of the planets. The fourth year was dawn of life. The 5th year was the Cambrian era. The 6th year was the Mesozoic period. What you could say is that the years, like, they get
the days.
Yeah, sorry, the days or the years. So you can say time doesn't have to be consistent for each grouping, because all of, like, the universe expanding and whatnot, that can be condensed into like a sentence. But the events of the Roman Empire only lasted 2,000 years, much more than the billion that, like, just the initial expansion took. Yeah. But a lot more happened relevant to humans.
Yes.
So from the human perspective, maybe the universe is only 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
So okay.
Scientism.
Can you prove to me that the moon landing happened?
I would get you on a rocket with me.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Okay.
No, I mean, like, you literally cannot do that. You do not have a rocket. You do not have the money to do that. Like,
so you're saying me?
Yes. Can you, sitting here, prove to me that the moon landing happened?
Well, I can show you the video. Right,
but that could have been faked.
I can tell you the reasons why it would be very hard to fake. Almost impossible.
Why is that?
They didn't have the technology at the time.
Who said that? No, I know people said that, but they're government agents, let's say. Okay. So I want you... So, okay, if you wanted to prove that the...
All right, no. So, if it's a conspiracy, and how many people are in NASA? How many people are in the government?
Lots.
So, you're saying that out of all these people, not one of them who worked on this project has said, oh yeah, it was actually fake, we fooled everyone, haha.
Santa Claus. You've got like 3 billion people in on it. And it works on, not everyone, didn't work on me, but it works on a lot of people.
It works on children.
The Tooth Fairy.
Works on children.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that it is possible to have 3 billion co-conspirators.
Now, but that conspiracy has taken thousands of years to put together.
Right, but let's say it's possible, right?
But even then, people break it. Like, sure, it exists, but people broke it, and we say there's no sense.
Okay, but here's the thing. How do I know that thousands of people worked on the moon landing? Maybe it was like, what do you mean thousands of people worked on it? You need a filmer, you need 2 actors, and you need the president. That's 4 people worked on the moon landing. Oh, and like the prop maker. That's 5 people. So here I'll contextualize it differently. Can you prove to me the Earth is round? If you stand on a mountain, you can see further than if you're standing on the ground. If you look at a boat going over the horizon, it dips below the horizon. Can you prove to me that the Earth is round? Or another way to prove the Earth is round. During a eclipse, the shadow on the moon, so during a solar eclipse, I think. No, that'd be lunar. Yeah, during a lunar eclipse, the shadow on the moon is round no matter where the moon is in the sky. What object leaves a round shadow no matter which angle you shine on it from? It is the round one, a sphere. So can a private individual independently verify, without taking anything on faith, the moon landing?
With a powerful enough telescope.
No, you can't. You can't
see the flag?
No.
Or the tracks left by the buggies?
No. You can with like a flyover, but it's too small from what I understand. And we don't have that telescope anyways. Yeah. Now,
but I'm saying it's much easier to get access to a telescope than a rocket.
That is a much more reasonable option, yes. Yeah. But, and I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure, because I saw like it was the highest resolution photos of the moon ever taken.
Yeah.
And I think that was done with a satellite going around the moon.
Yeah.
And the footprints of the astronauts were 1/5 of a pixel wide. So you could see the paths they walked along, but you couldn't see the individual footprints. And if that is the highest resolution photos we have of the moon, then that would suggest to me that there's maybe 1 or 2 telescopes out there that can do that, if any.
So Buzz Aldrin and what's the other one? Michael Phelps.
Michael Collins and Neil Armstrong.
So Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin should have gone into the buggy and drawn a giant dick on the moon to prove they want
the moon's pretty big. Like you can't see the paths, right? Like even if they're really long, like you would need a very thick.
Yeah, well, they would have needed a very large.
Like you need a very wide buggy.
Yeah. They also lined with much wider buggy.
And here's the thing. There's been people on the moon.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
Because the technology today is easily capable of doing that. Okay, not easily, but obviously capable of doing that.
Yes.
So the question is not, have people been to the moon? The question is, did the United States, with a massive time limit, wanting to beat Russia at all costs, land on the moon on the date they said they did? Like, I have no doubt they landed on it like 2-3 years later. But on the date they did they? Or did they simply say, yeah, look, we made it, guys. Because then we can win the moon race, we win the Cold War.
Well, they do have the film evidence. And
they have the film evidence.
And it has been shown to... people have seen it.
Yes, but...
Okay, and...
that's still taking on faith.
Knowing the technology at the time, because I've looked at this, knowing the technology at the time, on all levels, so that we've been told they had. So the rockets that we have, they were doing fly-arounds, there's satellites, Yuri Gagarin went up, all that stuff. So doing those things.
Or did Yuri Gagarin go up? There is doubts he ever went to space. And they're much more substantial than the moon ones, because he was potentially murdered. And they think the reason he was murdered, because he... best pilot on Earth, basically, and he died in a plane
ignoring
crash.
Yuri Gagarin, then.
No, but it does...
No, seeing Sputnik go up and rotate, and you can see the blip.
Well, you can hear it with that radio, yeah.
You could also see Sputnik. You could look at it through a telescope.
Okay.
So you could see Sputnik. So knowing that we have rockets that go up there, and knowing video editing at the time, the technology we had, it was easier to put people on the moon than to do a video edit.
So you're still falling into the same exact problem with your argument. You aren't giving me any evidence that couldn't be faked. Give me a scientific demonstration I can do that proves people have been on the moon.
All right. How would you go about casting shadows to be like they are on the moon?
What do you mean?
Okay. So if you're on the moon, shadows are going to be cast differently than anywhere else because of the size of the moon and its distance to the sun and how they're going to stretch and move. Shadows are going to be incredibly different.
So just use a light then.
Okay, so just use a light. So, a light is not as strong as the sun at that angle. To get a light powerful enough to do that, you need a ridiculously huge light.
I don't think you do.
No, you do.
You're asking me to take that on faith. You see the problem here.
All right.
No, you can't look up anything that'll prove it.
I'm not looking up anything. Okay, I'm casting a shadow.
Looks pretty good.
All right. Now, the shadows from the moon footage are longer and they taper different than shadows on Earth because they weren't using artificial light for the moonlight. So, just assuming the moon... Stop that smug constant grin. Okay.
No. So what happened, right, was the studio lights sucked, so they came up with this excuse to...
No, the studio lights didn't suck because you need... ridiculously...
No, but Connor, you're missing the entire point.
I cannot build a set of lights big enough for you. Like, with the lights I have, I cannot do the lighting. It is impossible to do that lighting with this.
You're missing the point of my
Here, I'll go build you this light here, I'll try...
of my thought experiment, I think. The point is that I can dismiss anything you say because you are telling me to accept it all on faith.
No, I'm not telling you to accept it on faith. I'm saying I showed you that light.
Yeah, and it looks fine to me.
No.
Yes, it does. It looked like a shadow is just a shadow. So, if you ask someone to accept something on faith, they can dismiss it without argument. It's funny how tilted you are about this. I don't think you're understanding my argument here. And this is what happens when you challenge someone's dogma, when you try to point out to them that the Earth isn't 6,000 years old, or that it is. Because they accepted on something on faith for so long, they get angry that all their arguments, it turns out, are just faith-based. So...
No, this is not faith-based. I just don't have the information.
That's exactly my point. So now I'm going to tell you how to prove that the moon landing is real.
No, I'm doing it right now.
So there is a mirror on the moon that you can shine a laser at, that Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong put there. They put a giant mirror on the moon that you can shine a laser at, and then you can measure the reflectivity of the laser, which is much higher than the surrounding area of the moon. And you can tell this because it doesn't reflect when you shine the laser at it. Like, you can just... But the issue with that is, how many people own an incredibly powerful laser, and plus a giant mirror on the moon is like, what, this big? My arms outstretched, let's say twice that. It's actually quite hard to hit without knowing exactly where it is and with pretty advanced equipment. And I don't have a giant laser. Okay, so, but that is one experiment you can do if you just go to like an astronomy building, let's say. They can give you a laser, they can give you the readings. Another thing you can do, people have been to the moon. They have taken pictures of some of the lunar dunes. A Japanese probe flew over the moon and did a 3D topography of the moon, right? Right?
Sure.
Okay, it reconstructed what the surface of the moon would look like using their satellite imagery. Pay attention.
No, because I have to defend my point on the shadows.
No, Connor, pay attention, seriously. Because we can do it after. This is an important point that it has nothing to do with whether the moon landing is real or not, and it's almost certainly real. So there was a dune that people who landed on the moon, like the last moon landing ever, I believe it was, they took a picture of. A Japanese satellite in 2014 or so went over the moon, did a 3D topography of the moon, reconstructed the ground of the moon based on what it would look like based on their 3D imagery. They didn't base it on like going on the moon. They just took pictures and they're like, yeah, this is the depths. This is what it would look like at this spot. So you can take their 3D image and the image the astronauts on the last lunar mission took and compare them. And they're identical. So the Japanese data is identical to the American picture. Like the Japanese are like, if you were standing here and took a picture of this, it would look like this. It's identical to what the picture the astronauts on the moon took. Now, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong also took a picture of that exact same dune in that exact same position. And that picture is also identical. And that is almost certainly the reason why the later astronauts took a picture of that. It was to say, okay, is this the same picture?
Yeah.
Now, I could dismiss that in a way by saying, well, you just showed me the same picture 3 times. But I will take it on faith that this was one of the pictures, and I shouldn't really, but just because I don't want to have to do research to make my point here. I will take on faith that this picture was one of the ones they released to the public, and then 20 years later, they released the next picture, which they just, altered their set a little bit to get, and then they got the Japanese government involved, and they got them to make a 3D model of their set, and so they're all fake. Okay, so that isn't a great example. Another one that you can do is the USSR was tracking the Apollo mission the entire time, and they never have claimed it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Or have they? Because you see, the thing is, when you go to the internet for your source, so there is a Russian Facebook. It's called Vikontal.
Yeah.
There is a Russian YouTube, which Russians don't even use that much. There is a Chinese Facebook.
Yeah.
There is a Reddit on the dark web called, I forget its name, but it's basically the same as Reddit, but it's on the dark web. So the only way to get to it is through the dark web, and you can do stuff like there's black market information there. There is a lot of dark web drug dealing places where you can buy drugs. There's a lot of stuff that exists that a Western world perspective has no idea exists for the most part.
Yeah.
Like when people are all saying, oh, we need an alternative to YouTube, we need an alternative to Facebook, there's no alternatives out there. They do exist. They're just like China has one, Russia has one. They have several, all of them. And they're on a part of the internet that isn't even accessed. So the USSR could potentially have actually said, yeah, no, this didn't happen. And we just don't know it because the propaganda of the United States government, the Canadian government, never let us know. Because we are relying on other people. We're always relying on other people for this information that we can't verify ourselves. That's the nice thing about the flat earth denying, is it's very easy to deny for yourself because you can do the experiment yourself very easily. You can get in a plane. You can climb. And now not everyone can get in a plane because that's expensive.
Yeah.
And so you can't actually blame these people. It's like, hey, I live in a prairie.
Yeah.
I can't afford a plane flight. And I can't go to the ocean. There are still experiments you can do, but if you don't know about them, and like an eclipse, right? There's a great. Well, how often do you get to see an eclipse?
Yeah.
And you need to see at least 2 in 2 different locations to verify this.
Yeah.
You can do what Aristotle did, and you can say, I think it was Aristotle, it might have been Archimedes, where he he knew there was two identical obelisks, and he got a friend of his in like Cairo or something to say, hey, can you measure the length of the shadow at like 4:00, and I'll measure it at 4:00, and so they both did, and then he's like, yeah, no, yours is way longer, so obviously the sun is shining on us at a different angle at the exact same time of day, so the Earth is at least bent away from the sun at this point, so it's probably round. So you could do that in theory with some friends that lived in the same longitude. If you put a 10-foot pole down and we'll see what there's different. So there are ways, but you might not know how to do them. You might not know that they exist.
Well, there's also the piece of paper in Shadows, where you can have a piece of paper and you can shine a light on it, and then you can bend the piece of paper and see that they go to different lengths.
Well, that shows that the obelisk experiment works.
Right.
That doesn't actually prove anything about the shape of the Earth.
Yeah.
Unless by bending the piece of paper you can bend the Earth.
No, so I was saying that's the proof for the obelisk.
Like a very hands-on proof.
Yeah.
So same with global warming, climate change. Well, temperature is different every year. How can I do anything? There's no proof. Like, I just have to take these scientists at their word.
Yeah.
Prove it. So there is actually an experiment I have done, and it's very easy. You can get dry ice, which is kind of hard, but not that hard. Like, it's legal to buy in most places. Or you can just fill a container with exhaust from a car.
Yeah.
And that's fairly easy to do for most people. Again, not everyone. So you get two clear containers. One you just fill with the air. You just grab it out of the air. And then the other one you fill with exhaust from a car. Or you fill with a cubic centimeter of dry ice or something.
Yeah.
And if you don't live in LA, you will have two different containers of air. You'll have one that has high CO2 and one that doesn't.
Yeah.
Then you have a thermometer in both of them, which again, pretty cheap object to buy.
Yeah.
And just get a sun lamp, more expensive, and shine on both of them two sun lamps ideal, or the same sun lamp equally spread, or you just put a timer on 10 minutes of this sun lamp, 10 minutes of that.
Yeah.
Try to keep it as identical as possible, essentially. And repeat the experiment potentially, because switch the sun lamps around, because one sun lamp might be hotter than the other. You can do a lot of stuff to try to confirm it. You'll notice that the temperature rises faster in the one with the CO2. So greenhouse gases exist. You can... What?
So I understand why yours got you through, but I'm wondering why my slinky one also succeeded. Because I can't exactly remember what it was about.
So I think it's metal memory, possibly. But so greenhouse gases exist. You can also do this with albedo. If you put a white piece of paper in there and a black piece of paper, or a white tile and a black tile, you can see that with a high albedo, the temperature doesn't go up nearly as fast because it's reflecting more of the light.
Yeah.
So you can see how the greenhouse effect works in practice. Now, the part you would have to take on faith unless you're willing to do the science from the ground up, and I don't actually know how to do this part, is does the amount of CO2 we put into the atmosphere actually affect the world? Because if you just put in a single molecule of CO2 into your container experiment, it's not going to do anything. Yeah. It's like if you put a thread of cotton on someone, it's not going to keep them any warmer.
Well, so from there, what you would do for that experiment is you would have to calculate the volume of the world.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You're taking everything on faith at that point.
To calculate the volume of the world, you would have to be in a very flat area to actually look at the horizon and do ridiculous amount of math.
Well, it's just pi r squared, right?
Yeah.
Times the distance to the edge.
Yeah.
That's the formula for area.
I know. I understand. No, but you'd look to horizon, and you'd have to use sun setting measurements and a few other things.
So I guess the volume of the Earth is h times pi r squared. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, there is a way to calculate the volume of the Earth.
Yeah, I know there is, but what I'm saying is you probably aren't capable of doing that with doing everything ground up, because at some point you'd have to say, what is
prove that 1 + 1?
Well, what's the volume of the atmosphere?
Yeah.
And then if you look that up, suddenly a scientist can give you a much smaller volume to lie to you to make the effect. So one thing you can do...
to get volume of atmosphere, you get a balloon and you get a very long string and you have it go up until it pops.
I don't know if that would give you the volume of the atmosphere.
It helps.
And also, the balloon, if the string was long enough, the balloon wouldn't be able to rise. So it's kind of an issue there.
Yeah.
You need a very large balloon.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of stuff you'd have to take on faith anyways. But you can do a decent number of the steps to see where they got it from. And also you can do something like you can just try to, okay, so volcanic eruptions can cause nuclear winters. Now, if you don't believe that, then you're going to need to find some other option. But you can say, okay, so the amount of gas is less than a single volcanic eruption that can cause a climate change.
Yeah.
And from there you can the other thing you can do is you can look at the climate models from the 70s, and then you can look at every single year the temperature, average temperature.
Yeah.
And you can see that they are well within their boundaries. Like, they're more accurate than the scientists thought they'd be.
Yeah.
So they've been, for 40 years, like, bang on the money. Now, you have to trust that they are actually accurate to what they are saying.
Yeah.
So again, it's much harder with climate change. And even harder with the moon landing, because there's not really anything you can do. Except do thought experiments like, okay, why wouldn't the Russians broadcast everywhere this didn't happen? Well, would anyone believe them if they did?
Yeah.
Because nobody believes it now. You could say, well, it'd be harder to, like, the dust coming off the landers shoots straight out. It doesn't stop like dust normally does into a cloud. You get like streams of dust coming up from behind the landers.
Yeah.
It's like, well, like, they can't, like, that's, they can't fake that. This is a vacuum they're in. There was vacuum technology on Earth at the time already. There was a very large vacuum chamber. Now, they have 130 minutes of continuous footage. The vacuum chamber couldn't operate that long. It would be way too expensive. It can operate for like 10 minutes at a time. Now, first of all, do you believe the vacuum chamber could actually only operate for 10 minutes at a time? Secondly, they never have released that full 1 hour, 30-minute reel. So potentially they could just say they took it and they didn't. Because they only released chopped up little sections. Well, they chopped it up because the theater technology, the film technology, you couldn't broadcast that much raw film.
Yeah.
But then why not? So again, it's like, well, okay, yeah, that's an explanation, but you could also have been faking this whole thing. They could just be saying, oh yeah, we had to chop it up for the audience, but they could have. And okay, well, you can't. The lighting, it's way too. There's no light system that can fake that. But how do we know? Like whose word are we taking this? A film expert? He's just a government agent. There is, unless there is a telescope that you can like buy.
Yeah.
That doesn't have a little moon sticker stuck on the front, but you can tell if it does pretty easily. You just point it at something else. That can actually see. Well, it doesn't even help anymore because so many people have been to the moon. 22. It's not many, really. But there will be a disturbance there, whether or not Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong...
do they always land in the same spot? Because the flag was planted where it was planted, right?
But that could have been planted by a later astronaut
that
went to the same spot and then planted it there. They didn't help their case by putting the wire on the flag because it's like waving. Like, if you've seen the video, they like plant the flag and it's like waving.
Yeah.
And it's like... Well, there's no wind on the moon, so it's obviously fake. But they actually stuck a wire. Apparently, they stuck a wire. Because, again, you have to take everything on faith.
Yes.
The golf ball that Armstrong apparently hit for miles has never been found. So, checkmate, atheists. Now, they can barely see footprints. They're like a fifth of a pixel wide. A golf ball is going to be very hard to find. I think so I've seen an interesting theory actually that they had faked footage ready to go if the moon landing failed, because the thing is, Russia was tracking the flight the whole time, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they actually had to land on the moon. They just had to send the ship to the moon. There could have been no one on the ship.
Yeah.
And then you have footage ready.
If you can go to the moon, you can prove it because the lander's still there.
Yeah, well, they could have put the lander there later.
You can look at how old it is, though, by the sun hammering it.
I'm not sure if you can.
I think you can for...
Because, like, carbon dating on Earth works by, you look at the surrounding, like, carbon.
No, it's not carbon dating. Because the moon has no radioactive shield. You would basically see how destroyed it has been by the sun.
But I haven't done the calculations for...
radioactive decay?
Yeah, so they could give me fake numbers. Because I would just... So my whole point about this, though, is to not say that the moon landing didn't happen. I'm almost certain it happened.
Yeah.
And even if it could have been faked, and that seems very unlikely, but even if it could have been faked, I think it would have been like, okay, we got the module to the moon, we crashed, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong are dead,
Get their clones.
Release the fake footage.
Yeah.
To show that we did it successfully. I think that would be the extent of the faking. I think, like, they would be willing to risk 3 people's lives. I think they would be. So, I think, like, they would have been willing to send them, but they might have said, okay, if this fails, we release the fake footage that says we did it right.
But then why did they prepare that speech?
Sapphire's speech is a good argument for why they didn't do that, except they could have leaked that they prepared that speech later to double confirm the fact that they never had a contingency plan for failure.
It just seems easier at this point to get to the moon.
But the thing is, right, it's not about, like, they could have landed on the moon easily in the next year or two.
Yeah.
Like, no doubts in mind. The thing is, they were racing Russia, so they were willing to do anything to beat Russia, right? Like, if you're in that mindset of... Because this is if you look at history, countries do this sort of thing all the time where they lie about stuff. Like, when the United States, it was called the... I looked it up recently. The United States said that Vietnam's Navy had fired on one of their ships, and so they re-engaged them, and they got permission to go to war with Vietnam, and that's how they entered the Vietnam War, as a full-blown war instead of just as a, like, sort of force that was hanging in the area.
Yeah.
It was later revealed that they were never attacked on August 4th. They were attacked on August 2nd. So, or they did fighting on August 2nd. I don't even know if they were attacked, but they fought on August 2nd. So they faked the attack so that they could go to war with Vietnam. If 9/11 was faked, which I don't think they've proven was faked at all yet, but they went to, like...
You mean, not faked by inside job?
Yes.
Because the towers did fall.
Yes, no, very real event. But if it was an inside job, if the United States wanted an excuse to go with Iraq, it was a great excuse to go to Iraq. Because the thing is, they went to Iraq and they're like, give us Osama bin Laden. They're like, he's not here. And they're like, well, we're going to stay and take all your oil anyways.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was Afghanistan they went to first, and they're like, yeah, no, he's not here. But Osama bin Laden was a footnote after, like, he was the excuse, but they didn't care nearly as much as they cared about just using it as an excuse to attack. As I said before, with, like, Operation Sea Spray and whatnot, the United States has done this kind of thing before. Mm-hmm. There was experiments done where there was 400 black men who had syphilis. They pretended to treat, but didn't actually treat them. They gave them injections. They're like, oh yeah, this is penicillin, this will cure you. They said, okay, we're going to give you this pill, see how you feel. Mm-hmm. They didn't treat them at all because they wanted to see how penicillin progressed. And 100 men died. 20 of their wives got sick, and their children were, like, 6 people's children were born with deformities. Because they didn't treat these guys at all. They just wanted to see what would happen if we let syphilis run its course. And they pretended to treat them. Governments lie constantly. They do propaganda all the time. They fake things to you. You look at... Okay, so look at North Korea.
Yeah.
How could all the officials say that, like, all be wrong, that the rest of the world looks up to North Korea and hates them? If you're in a bubble, you don't realize you're in a bubble a lot of the time. Like, did you know about Vikantal? Did you know that Russia had a Facebook?
I thought they might. I didn't know it, though.
Or do you know about Bilibili, or...
No idea what Bilibili is.
The Chinese Facebook? Or did you know there's a Reddit on the dark web?
No.
So, I think, like, when you're in a bubble...
I don't think you have proof of that Reddit on the dark web. I'm just taking it face value.
Well, we can go to it if you want.
No, thanks.
But if you're in a bubble, like, you anything outside there's a whole lot of people saying the moon landing was faked, but they're all just crazies, right? So...
I wouldn't go so far call someone crazy.
But my point is, you say how it was never leaked. How do you know it wasn't leaked and they were dismissed? It's the same with the UFOs. How could the government keep UFOs secret for 70 years?
Call Bob Laser crazy.
Yeah. And then they admitted it last year that they were. It is possible for these things to happen. Now, obviously, people like Bob Laser but Bob Laser still, it's like, but is he still crazy? Like, we still don't know.
Yeah.
So it is still possible for them to keep a handle on some of these things. It's difficult.
Yeah.
But, well, they've got, like, the most powerful group of assassins in the world, like the CIA. That's pretty good incentive on its own.
But then again, things like the WikiLeaks happen, and that guy who's currently living in Russia.
Yeah, well, no, everyone said the NSA wasn't spying on you for years.
Yeah.
And it was revealed 20 years later that they had been spying on the entire United States, and nobody knew about it. It was just a crazy conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
The mafia was just there's no organized syndicate. That's ridiculous. They were a conspiracy theory. I'm making the same mistake a lot of people make. They're still a conspiracy theory.
Really?
Well, I mean, all of these are still conspiracy theories. a conspiracy is not a crazy idea. A conspiracy is an agreement between people. So when you say a conspiracy theory, what you're saying, it's not actually conspiracy. That's a short form. It's conspiracy of silence theory. So what you're saying is, I theorize that a bunch of people have agreed not to talk about something. So it's a conspiracy of silence. So when you say it's not a conspiracy theory, it was literally a conspiracy of silence, and the theory was correct. Right. So the MK Ultra is a correct conspiracy theory. Whereas the Mafia is a correct conspiracy theory.
Bigfoot is not a correct conspiracy theory because, I mean, it depends where you're on, because I don't think anyone would be covering that up.
Yeah, so Bigfoot is not a conspiracy theory. Well, I think, okay, no. There is people who do have conspiracy theories about Bigfoot. Yeah. Because there are some weird cases, like when that kid was kidnapped. Yeah. And then the government just said, like, nobody's allowed in this park, nobody can do anything. And then, like, 6 different government organizations. So it is possible that Bigfoot... So there are people that do have conspiracy of silence theories regarding Bigfoot's existence. Yeah. However, I think most cryptozoologists and cryptid fans just think it's possible Bigfoot exists, which something possibly being existing and you believing in it despite popular belief is not a conspiracy theory. Yeah. That is just a, well, cryptid theory, I guess, or a theory about something's existence. It's not the same thing, but they do get conflated. So what I saw was people asking for proof of the moon landing, because I was curious. I was like, what proof is there of the moon landing? So I wanted to look it up. A lot of the comments were, this is the most idiotic question I've ever heard, or this is very stupid, or like, how can you... And I think there's probably similar to your reaction of anger of like...
Well, I'm upset because I can't remember one of the proofs, and I'm trying to find it, and I could be wrong on. But I'm pretty certain you can actually do an experiment with sunlight, a lamp, and looking at the lighting on the moon, in the fact that creating the light from the sun on like a shadow casting, recreating that with lights is incredibly difficult on Earth. Yeah. And we can do it, but it's very difficult. And then doing the same lighting process on the moon is even more difficult. And so there's actually an experiment you can do, and it's like the most solid one, which is you look at shadows and you try to recreate them.
But how do I know what the light's like on the moon?
Well, there is that. So that's a problem. How do I know what the light's like on the moon? So rather than saying how I know like on the moon,
it's very similar to Steven Spielberg's studio.
Well, so the looking at the lighting then that they give you with the footage, it's how do you create this lighting without CGI? And so then we have to go from there. How do you create this lighting without CGI? And it's, I mean, this is hearsay. I'm going to say this is hearsay because I couldn't find footage and I don't have a bunch of lights. But to do that sort of lighting, you need a ridiculously giant wall of lasers, basically, to cast shadows like that. And that's one of the best ones is trying to recreate that. And
except...
Well, no, you can have a studio that can recreate that. Like, those exist now. You can actually do that. And it's a lot cheaper now. But then you say, all right, could they have done this many years ago versus just getting a rocket up? Yeah. So that's where you go, is you get a studio that can actually cast those shadows, and then you see how ridiculously hard it is to make that studio.
You know they had scuba diving suits in like the 1400s?
Yes.
And cameras were invented in the 1700s?
I didn't know about the cameras.
Like, the stuff people could do back then is always very surprising.
Yeah, the
Minoans...
This is a giant wall of red lasers.
The Minoans had carvings that were etched so small. Mm-hmm. They're like nanometers wide, each engraving. And the only way to be able to see something like that, like not the images themselves, but the needle passes, the only way to see something like that would be to have magnifying glasses of like today's quality, basically. And this was before the Bronze Age collapse. So like the sea people took a lot of technology from us, I'm saying. Like we're past that level now, but it was very high.
Dang, Fulmir.
So maybe it was easier to invent some crazy light technology they still haven't released to the public than to go to the moon. And the other thing, how do you keep a secret like that? Yeah. Well, you tell all your scientists to build a rocket and send it to the moon, and then you get 3 guys to film a video for you. And then everyone, like the scientists, like, yeah, we did. And you're like, yeah, you did, buddy. Yeah, you did. Like, we go to the moon, right? And we'll have a rabbit farm. Yes, you will, buddy. Yes, you will. the Tale of Two Cities or whatever it's called. No, Mice and Men, I think. Yeah. Anyway, just shoot the younger brother in the head. It's like, you did it, buddy. Yep, you did. And then the president's just like, another burden that I won't tell anyone for 75 years. And so, but yeah, a lot of people were like, this is a very stupid question. What do you do? Why'd you ask this?
So my frustration wasn't at you or a thing. It was, I was trying to remember the lighting.
And I'm sure a lot of these people, it's because they feel like they know something to be true, but they can't actually prove it. Which I think...
Yeah, is what happened with me.
Yeah, because like maybe the proof doesn't actually exist. Yeah. I was convinced the other day that a ship called the Louisiana was sunk so that the United States could enter World War I, but I couldn't find information on that anywhere. But I could have sworn like German U-boats sunk a United States trading ship that allowed the United States to enter the war, but there was doubts whether the United States shot it or the Germans shot it, because the United States just really wanted it in World War I. But I couldn't find that anywhere. So sometimes you think you know something, and it's like,
Was there U-boats in World War I? I thought that was
World War II. Yeah, it was World War II. Maybe it was World War... Yeah, it would have to be World War II. There was U-boats, but they weren't extensively used. Yeah. Like the American Civil War had U-boats.
Those must have been terribly...
they weren't quite this... They weren't submersibles. Yeah. They were
underwater boats.
But they weren't submersible.
So that's like saying the Napoleonic War had a tank.
1400s had tanks.
Yeah.
Like way before 400 years before Napoleonic Wars, they had tanks.
Well, there's that guy who there's a museum of tanks in the UK. Actually, is really interesting.
Yeah, no, the guy who wrote the fight book designed a tank that they built, I think, in the UK, and it's from like the before Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah. Well, so this tank is 2 horses inside the cart pulling it with a bunch of guys.
No, they're pushing a tank in front of them.
No, they're pulling the cart. They're just inside it, and there's also a bunch of guys in there with guns, and they started building it, and the problems arose that it gets very hot in there with the horses and all the men because it's a metal tank. It's very hard to turn. You have horses inside a metal tank. They're going to be very unhappy. And everyone's deaf because you're firing muskets or rifles inside this metal shell.
Well, that's always going to be the problem of a tank, like until you get good hearing protection. But yeah, if anyone's interested...
And there's also all the smoke from the guns coming up.
Look up the fight book. It's a book from the 1400s that has diagrams for technology we've never seen anywhere else, like diving suits. Well, we've seen those, but like working diving suits, tanks, thimbles that you can use to approach castles and plant mines on them. They're very funny looking. You like hide inside a giant thimble and like run out of castle. These things called crayfish, which are like these giant robots covered in blades that have explosives on both ends. There's tanks. There's fighting techniques we've never seen before, like duels between men and women. So you stick a man in a hole, and you have a woman, so it's an even fight, and they fight each other. There's it's really fascinating. It was only like they just did a documentary on it like at the end of last year.
Was it written by a Frenchman?
I don't know.
Because I do know that how most trebuchets are designed and built and drawn is wrong. Because most designs for a trebuchet come from illustrations that a Frenchman did, except he was illustrating them and he didn't know what they looked like, so he was guessing, and so he made them look fancier than they were. And so most trebuchets, if you design them the way he did, which a lot of people do, they have a huge flaw in them, and how they're actually built and their systems were built.
Well, the trebuchets we make today still fling like...
Yeah, no, we can do it because we have stuff now, but for what they were working with then, it's a recreation trebuchets. You have to build slightly differently, and also the systems just work better. Like there's a winch system that most trebuchets have that we use from the drawing, and it works just fine. But the one that they actually used in the past, where you can find it for catapults and scorpions and augers, is a different winch system, and they use it for trebuchets.
Well, I think this guy's, it's like a treadmill. Like you just walk on a treadmill to like bring it back, and then you step out and like...
Okay, well, then it's not the fight books guys thing. But yeah, there was illustrations that
it's something like that.
For trebuchets that are commonly used.
What was really interesting about this whole moon landing thing was these people were angry their faith was being attacked, and they didn't know how to defend it. Because I think what happened was they were forced to confront the fact that they didn't actually have any proof that the moon landing was real.
Yeah.
There is proof out there, but they didn't have it. And that made them defensive and angry, and it showed what scientism is. Just the Catholic Church never went away. It just changed form in a sense.
Well,
it's like you must blindly believe the narrative that, and that's why YouTube banning conspiracy theories is absurd.
Yeah.
Because what you've done is you've said like Gutenberg has suddenly been like, I will not publish any findings against the Catholic Church. I will not say that. I will not allow Galileo's lies, his crazy conspiracy theory that the sun is at the center of the solar system. I am not publishing that because that's just a crazy conspiracy theory. Because the Church, for 400 years, has very clearly said the Earth is the center of the solar system.
Yeah.
You get this.
Well, there's no atheists.
Yeah, or they're very rare. Skeptics are very rare.
Yeah.
True skeptics. There's a lot of one-step skeptics that are like, well, that goes against my perceived narrative.
Well, I think there's also a lot of one-step atheists. There's one-step and two-step atheists. I'll even go with three. So one-step atheists is raised by Catholics.
Yeah.
And they're anti.
Yeah. They just hate everything to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Two-step is
you read the Bible and you're like, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and also
it contradicts itself.
There's a bit more to it. So you've read the Bible, you've looked at other religions, and you go, now all these religions are garbage, and you dislike religion. So that's another step. You don't like religion in general. And then the three-step, I think, is kind of similar to what you are. It's like there's no God. Like there's that sort of atheism.
Not like me.
But there's just sort of like, there is no God. Like I can't prove it. But even then there's no God, but they will have a different religion, and they will be theist in that faith.
Well, I'm not religious, but I'm not theist, but I can't disprove a God. I think that's different. Like, it's not that there's no God, it's I can't prove there's a God.
Yeah.
And I can't prove there's not a God.
Yes.
I think it's just a state of not knowing. That's true. Like, skepticism is arguing against every side of an argument. When you come up with an argument, you have to come up with an argument against your argument. That's what skepticism is. It's never skepticism is constant motion. You never dismiss something and that's it. You have to dismiss your dismissal. And like that was literally the foundation of the school of the skeptics. They like, well, I quoted it before, but it's literally something along the lines of
the book of not knowing.
The chief ground of skepticism is that to every reason there is an opposite reason equivalent, which makes us forbear to dogmatize. So dogmatism is accepting something as truth, as fact. You can't do it. Like skepticism, for every reason there is an equal opposite. Well, there's an opposite equivalent reason.
Socrates must have been really annoying to talk with.
Well, yeah, he said, "I am the wisest man in all of Athens because I know nothing."
Yeah, he just must have been really annoying to talk with, like the Socratic method, him being a skeptic, because there was a skeptical master.
Well, I think Diogenes would be the annoying one. Like he
isn't
he would walk backwards into the theater, and then people would say, "Hey, get out! You're going the wrong way." It's like, how do you know what the right way is?
Well, Diogenes you can sort of deal with because he's a contrarian, but Socrates, like the Socratic method, is the most annoying thing in the world to have happen to you if someone does it right. And I have no doubt that Socrates could actually do it right.
Oh yeah, he's probably great at it.
But the Socratic method is so irritating to have done. I mean, it's irritating because, well, you're wrong if you're getting irritated by the Socratic method.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
isn't it like you basically strip everything away and
well, you just ask them to prove it. You just say like, okay, why does it rain? They're like, well, precipitation. It's like, what causes precipitation? Well, it's Socratic irony. You just keep getting them to explain things until they realize they can't explain it, and then they're like, oh, so you don't actually know. You're just taking it on faith.
Yeah.
And yeah, like that's the same thing. Actually, like if the vanishing point of a boat.
Yeah.
One of the arguments flat earthers can use, I don't know if flat earthers actually exist or not, but one of the argument they can use is
the boat's flying off the edge of the world.
No, your eyes can only see 15 kilometers. And so the boat is just going out of view. Now, of course, standing on a mountain makes like, because then you can see for more than 15, but then I guess you could say, well, no, it doesn't. That's just, you're just bad at measuring distance.
Yeah.
But there are ways, you can question anything. And the fact that people don't shows that they're dogmatically following science, which is funny because science, like good scientists, which is a lot of them, don't. They do question everything.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, gravity is probably this, but we have no idea.
Well, apparently a very upsetting thing for scientists recently. So there's this a big group of studies that were done. I can't remember what it was. And so they tried to recreate them. And like, okay, we can't recreate this one because it's too hard. We can't recreate this experiment because it's unethical. We can't recreate this one. It's like one field. And so they managed to, out of, I think it was 150 different experiments in this one field. I can't remember what it was on, but they managed to have the ability...
Probably psychology.
Yeah, they had the ability to... Yeah, it was in psychology. They had the ability to do about 36 of the experiments. And only 2 of them turned out the way that they turned out before.
If there's a really interesting lesson a lot of psychology classes do, where they talk about K-waves, which was a phenomenon in physics that was discovered, researched, tried to disprove, couldn't be disproven. Everyone's like, wow, this is cool. This is like this new waveform we've learned about. We had no idea it existed. It causes all these things. It explains a whole bunch. And then like 5 years later, they realize they don't exist at all. Huh. But they recorded them. Like with their scientific equipment, they measured them and recorded them. And then eventually they realized, hey, these don't exist. So I guess we got an update.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking like, imagine if the universe actually did patch itself.
Yeah.
And
just
the
ruin
rules
everything.
For physics just...
It's like updated K-waves, they're confusing and unnecessary. It's like, remove them. Well, that's... Dude, what do we trust?
There's a scientist... Just do it like a college... how crazy would you appear, right? So you're a professor, and you're doing a gravity experiment with your students, and you're trying to prove like gravity is the acceleration force downwards of, what was it, 8.9 point... It's
9.8, yeah.
Yeah, it's the acceleration of 9.8. Then you do the experiment, and it's 10.
Yeah. Oh.
And you do it again and again, and then you're trying to tell everyone, actually gravity's 10 now.
Yeah. Yeah. These people that think they're so much smarter than everyone else because they listen to the dogmatic narrative, they are not scientists. They are worshippers of a faith that even the what do you call those people? The preachers of the faith think their flock are idiots because you shouldn't listen to what they're saying.
Yeah.
Essentially, because
unless they're sociologists.
Well, no. Like everyone's trying to disprove their own thing. Now, sociologists sometimes fall into the trap of, well, we're a science, therefore what we say is true. Whereas in science, everything they say is false.
Yeah.
Like even mathematics, which is ground up true, is still based on 5 axioms, which you can pick and choose as you like.
Yeah.
But we have decided these are the axioms we choose, and therefore everything from those axioms upwards is derived from base principles.
Yeah. Well, remember
until the next patch.
I remember our dad told us one of the hardest tests he ever did.
Well, it was just prove E equals MC squared.
Yes, well, it was proof, but his professor had a test which he expected everyone to fail at.
Yeah.
And it was the math section of physics. And he gave them 1 + 1, prove. 1 + 1 = 2, prove. And
I don't think you can.
Yeah, well, you can't.
Because that's one of the axioms of math.
Yeah, so that was his teaching point, is
A plus B equals B plus A.
Yeah.
And, well, that's not even an axiom. That's just that is a semantic layer on top of mathematics, isn't it? Because technically you could say 3 + 5 = 5 + 3, but saying 8 is just 8 in English means 5 + 3 or 2 + 6 or 1 + 7 or -1 + 9. Like 8 is just a word that has infinite meanings.
Yeah.
But they're restricted within a field, which is kind of cool, actually.
Yeah.
What was the... I have to go to the bathroom, so I want to wrap it up. But there was... Philosophy bestows life in that it reveals the dignity and purpose of living. Materiality bestows death in that it benumbs or clouds those facilities of the human soul which should be responsive to the enlivening impulses of creative thought or ennobling virtue. How inferior to these standards of remote days are the laws by which men live in the 20th century. Today man, a sublime creature with infinite capacity for self-improvement, in an effort to be true to false standards, turns from his birthright of understanding, without realizing the consequences, and plunges into a maelstrom of material illusion. The precious span of his earthly years he devotes to the pathetically futile effort to establish himself as an enduring power in a realm of unenduring things. Gradually, the memory of his life as a spiritual being vanishes from his objective mind, and he focuses all his partly awakened facilities upon the seething beehive of industry which he has come to consider the sole actuality. From the lofty heights of his selfhood, he slowly sinks into the gloomy depths of ephemerality. He falls to the level of the beast, and in brutish fashion mumbles the problems arising from his all too insufficient knowledge of the divine plan. Here, in the lurid turmoil of a great industrial, political, commercial inferno, man writhes in self-inflicted agony, and reaching out with swirling mists, strives to clutch and hold the grotesque phantoms of success and power. Ignorant of the cause of life, ignorant of the purpose of life, ignorant of what lies beyond the mystery of death, yet possessing within himself the answer to it all, man is willing to sacrifice the beautiful, the true, and the good within and without upon the blood-stained altar of worldly ambition. The world of philosophy, that beautiful garden of thought wherein the sages dwell in the bond of fraternity, fades from view. In its place rises an empire of stone, steel, smoke, and hate, a world in which millions of creatures, potentially human, scurry to and fro in the desperate effort to exist, and at the same time maintain the vast institution which they have erected and which, like some mighty juggernaut, is rumbling inevitably towards an unknown end. In this physical empire, which man erects in the vain belief that he can outshine the kingdom of the celestials, everything is changed to stone. Fascinated by the glitter of gain, man gazes at the Medusa-like face of greed and stands petrified. In this commercial age, science is concerned solely with the classification of physical knowledge, an investigation of the temporal and illusionary parts of nature. Its so-called practical discoveries bind man but more tightly with the bonds of physical limitation. Religion, too, has become materialistic. The beauty and dignity of faith is measured by huge piles of masonry, by tracts of real estate, or by the balance sheet. Philosophy, which connects heaven and earth like a mighty ladder, up the rungs of which the illumined of all ages have climbed to the living presence of reality. Even philosophy has become a prosaic and heterogeneous mass of conflicting notions. Its beauty, its dignity, its transcendency are no more. Like other branches of human thought, it has been made materialistic, practical, and its activities so directionalized that they may also contribute their part to the erection of this modern world of steel and stone. I just thought that was a pretty good summary of what we were talking about, actually, but also of...
Sounds a bit like the Tower of Babel.
Yeah, well, science has become devoted to improving life by binding us to a life that we shouldn't be. Like, we've become worshippers of death through just binding to science. And also...
like the Numenorians.
Philosophy has been fractured. There's not philosophy. There's... we could do... are you a utilitarian, or are you a Kantian? Are you an existentialist? Like, it's been fractured, whereas philosophy should be a whole. You shouldn't be a Platonist or it's just... Philosophy itself is a transcendent wisdom that teaches you about infinite life, is what he says. And yeah, I just thought it was a good way to wrap it up.
All right.
Been a great audience. Thanks for watching. Bye. Oh wait, I said that way.